Hello everyone, how are you today? I am Muhammad Amir Siddiq, international journalist around the world. People know me. I am here in Vienna, Austria. IAEA head office, UNO, United Nations Atomic Energy head office. I want to today program for some press briefing. Today's press briefing with the Commissioner General of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini. Today date is 12th June and day is Monday. Let's go to check what he said and what is the special message. My video start now.
I'm going to hand over straight away to the Commissioner General from UNRWA, who's been briefing member states here this morning and is here to speak to you and obviously take questions. It's really good to have you here, Philippe Lazzarini, and over to you.
Thank you, Martin. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for making time for this press briefing. Basically, I'm here in Vienna primarily for an official visit with the Austrian government, but Vienna being also the third UN headquarter, and also has been for 20 years the headquarter of the organization I'm heading, UNRWA. Between 75 and 96, we were present here. I felt it was also important to engage with member states to bring them a little bit up to speed to some of the challenges UNRWA is confronted with, and basically I wanted to share the same with you today. Maybe just to start, and I started my briefing also by reminding member states how unique within the UN system UNRWA is. Why? Because we are the only organization which is requested to provide direct public services to one of the most destitute community in the region, being the Palestinian refugees. In reality, we act as a ministry of education, we act as a ministry of primary health, we act as a ministry of social services, we act as a ministry of municipal services in the camp across the region. And when I say the region, it's in Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, West Bank, Jerusalem, and Gaza. For these activities, we have 28,000 staff, which in terms of staffing makes one of the biggest organizations within the United Nations system. We provide services to nearly 550,000 girls and boys across the region. That's the education part. We provide vocational training to about 10,000 youths in the region. We provide primary health services to 2 million people in the region. We provide municipal services in all our camps. And in addition of that, and here it's like any other UN agency, we provide humanitarian assistance whenever there is a crisis. And today, the humanitarian assistance means we are, for example, providing food and cash assistance to nearly 2 million people, among them 1.2 million people only in the Gaza Strip. I was highlighting also this morning that we operate in 5 different areas, 4 of them being in a crisis. Lebanon, we all know, is a country which falls into a deep financial, economic and political crisis. In top of that, it's a country which is also impacted by the crisis in Syria, hosting more than 1 million Syrian refugees in addition of the Palestinian refugees. Syria, you are all very familiar of the situation, 12 years of a conflict, which then has further been compounded by an unprecedented financial and economic crisis, but partly intertwined with the one of Lebanon, and then also a country which has been unprecedentedly hit by the earthquake at the beginning of the year. In Syria, basically the entire Palestinian refugee community is rely on UNRWA assistance. If you go to Jordan, Jordan is the only one which is not hit by the crisis I described before, except that, like any other country in the region, they have severely been hit economically by the COVID, and people now obviously are also struggling. But the other two areas of concern for us is the West Bank, where confrontation with the Israeli security forces and Palestinian communities have significantly increased. Number of incursions have significantly increased, and last year was the deadliest year since 2005 when it comes to the West Bank, and this year is certainly on track to be even deadliest than it was last year. So big concern about the situation in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and last but not least, Gaza, which I also described today as being a kind of, a self-man-made humanitarian welfare society. You have an entire population which today rely on food assistance, whereas before the blockade in 2015, in 2005-06, we had only 80,000 people who were relying on food assistance when it comes to Gaza. Now, in this context, you know that our agency is very much associated to financial crisis, but I keep telling member states, please do not take it as a given, our ability to continue to muddle through with the financial crisis. Our ability to continue to provide services is slowly but surely coming to an end, and if it comes to an end, what is at stake are all the activities I just mentioned before. Why are we in the situation in which we are in today? I believe that the financial crisis has started about 10 years ago, has started at the time the Israel-Palestinian conflict started to be deprioritized, when they have been emerging of new regional dynamic, global dynamic, competing crises, domestic reason in a number of countries, and the combination of all these has led to the stagnation of the resources of UNRWA. I say stagnation because basically our resources today are very similar than the one we had in 2013. And between 2013 and today, this region has been hit by multiple crises. Needs have significantly increased. We have been also confronted by soaring prices like anyone else in the world. But expectations from the communities have also increased, considering that UNRWA is the only lifeline, but the agency could not anymore deliver at the level of the expectation, and this tension between stagnating resources and increasing cost, increasing needs has year after year become unbearable for the organization. We are the only organization which operates today with a negative cash flow, with starting the year each time with important liabilities. When I was in New York last week, 2 weeks ago, at the time of the donor conference, I was telling member states, please do not take anymore our ability to go from one financial crisis to another one as granted. The situation is very serious. The agency has started, if you metaphorically, you can say that a boat started to sink. We haven't sunk, but to prevent the full sinking of the agency, it requires political mobilization and political will. Over the last 2-3 years, the agency has tried few tracks to overcome the situation in which we have been locked in. First has been to promote mutual agreement compact with member states. On one hand, we tell them this is what you can expect from the agency as a modern organization delivering services in line with our time, but we need more predictability from you. Increase your contribution, be more predictable. A predictable UNRWA should be in the interest of anyone in the region, because a predictable UNRWA promotes also the stability in a highly has ended by everybody agree with the strategy, the approach, but no increased contribution. Then we say, fine, so let's try another avenue. How can we partner? In the UN, United Nations DNA, partnership is very important. But the problem is that in the absence of a political horizon, political framework, partnering in the eyes of the community and the host country means handing over responsibility. Even if it is not, that's the way it is perceived. It fuels the feeling of a conspiracy, it fuels the feeling that the agency is turning its back, and by weakening the agency, we also weaken the future right of the Palestinian refugees if there is no political framework. So this avenue has shown its limit. And the third avenue, we are an organization asked to provide public services, but we are funded like an NGO. This does not function anymore. It has functioned for 60 years, but it does not function anymore since 10 years. So can we, yes or not, go through, assess the compulsory contribution of the member state, the same member state who provide to the agency the mandate. That was last November. We had discussion in New York. They have made a decision to slightly increase the contribution, and this has not been the game changer that the organization was seeking. So today we are in a situation where I do not have any visibility anymore beyond the month of September. I do not know what will happen in September, October, November. We have no indication of contribution. We have indication of big donors having told us that they will decrease their contribution to the organization. At the time we need an increase. So our shortfall today is to survive till the end of the year, $150 million, to end the year without important liabilities, more than $200 million, and in addition, we need $75 million just to keep the food pipeline in Gaza beyond September, and $30 million for Syria and Lebanon. The 75 million of Gaza is critical. You might have heard recently that World Food Programme had to significantly decrease its activities in the Gaza Strip and drop 200,000 beneficiaries. WFP and UNRWA provide food assistance to 75% of the entire population in the Gaza Strip, and basically we represent the equivalent of 1 meal a day for this 75%. So if WFP, which break down, and UNRWA also break down, at the same time we would be confronted to our inability to pay our salaries, we would be exposed to a very explosive situation in the Gaza Strip, since we are the main provider of, I would say, basic social services to this community. So that has been also my call to the international community. Next year we will mark the 75th years of an agency which was supposed to be a temporary agency. So nothing to celebrate about the duration, because that means the longest lasting unresolved conflict is still not resolved. And basically, to promote the sustainability of the agency, I have called for political willingness, attention, to ensure that in the absence of alternative, in the absence of a political solution, that we remain committed to the Palestinian refugees in the region through an agency like UNRWA. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed.
I was just wondering if you could provide us a little more, I mean, it all sounds quite bleak, this fact you need $75 million just to keep the food pipeline going beyond September. You were talking about partnering with other UN agencies. What are the best prospects you have at the moment of filling this gap in funding, even though, even if you have become quite used to the cash shortfall right now here?
Yeah. Cash distribution is the one who had now, because of financial difficulties, to decrease the number of beneficiaries from 300,000 to 100,000, so a drop of 200,000. Our best prospect is that the main contributor and donor on cash and food succeed to remain committed and to process this $75 million. I'm still hopeful that this might happen, but we also know what the danger is all about. Now, more broadly, I was highlighting the $150 million shortfall of the agency for longer sustainability. I do believe also that there are some prospects coming from the region and Gulf countries where I believe there is still room for them to increase and to be further committed and supportive of the agency.
I'm from EFE, and I wanted to know if you're working on some other projects, like small projects directed to this small group of people, of refugees. For example, any similar project as the one in Syria in adaptabilities of houses with people with disabilities.
To inclusion of disabled, indeed the agency has developed a policy. We are still lagging behind, there is absolutely no doubt. We have also infrastructure which were built, I would say, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, which also need to be adapted to promote better inclusion. And this has become a focus also of the agency, especially when it comes to promoting equal opportunities for people with disabilities within the organization. I don't know if that answers or not.
Yes.
Sharif from Africa. My question goes to the cost of the agency, because before it was here. So do you think that the change of the place from Vienna to the West Bank has affected that with the budget to come down, or there is, so that the organization could save money regarding, for example, the logistics, the offices, and the staff members?
Question, the move was in 95. Just to give you a few facts, the agency with 28,000 staff has 200 international, so 200%. So the ratio of international compared to national is certainly the smallest in the entire UN system. The international part is a part which is funded through assessed contribution, but the programs and part of the agency is fully funded by voluntary contribution. Now, the main reason of the move from Vienna to Gaza first, because the headquarters went to Gaza, between Gaza and Amman, was of a political nature. It was as a follow-up of the Oslo Agreement, and at the time the Palestinian, the PLO, decided to be headquartered in Gaza, they requested also UNRWA to be headquartered in Gaza. And that's when the move has taken place. So the initial rationale was not necessarily of a budgetary rationale, but it was more of a political rationale. What I can tell you when it comes to the budget is a few things. Number one, we are certainly the agency which spend less per staff. Why? The comparator of our staff when it comes to the salary is not the other UN agencies, but it's the host country where we operate. Because most of our employees are in reality providing public-like services comparable to the host country. So we have about 20,000 teachers within the organization. The comparator for our teacher will be, in fact, the host country. Over the last 10 years, this agency has gone through multiple efficiency processes because of budget constraints, which since, I would say, 2014, started to become austerity measure, to the extent today that the austerity is also impacting the quality of our services. We have gone, for example, over the last 10 years from an average of 20-25 kids in our classroom in some field of operation to nearly 50. And you do not have the same quality of education when you have 50 people in a classroom than when you have 25. Same with health services. Today, the average time a doctor or nurse spend for a consultation is 3 minutes. No more than that, and this is nothing else than the impact of the austerity. And this is without counting the fact that the agency has been totally unable to invest in its modernization, in the maintenance also of some of our important assets. And we keep also drawing the attention of the impact of this to the member states.
2 weeks ago in New York and today here you addressed the member states how critical the situation, the financial situation. What was the reaction of the member states? And actually I want to know what was the reaction of Muslim countries, first of all. Second, I guess 1 week ago the UN High Commissioner was also here. He was also not happy with the budget of the UN High thing, you know. I'm thinking it is some kind of all UN institutions have such a financial problem, such a financial issues. What would you say to them? Thank you.
Is hit most of the UN agencies nowadays, because you have also a number of donors who have indicated that their overseas budget will decrease, or you have a high part of the overseas budget which might be affected to different type of priorities depending on. We had a few years ago, you remember, the UK decided to go from 0.7 to 0.5% of the GDP. This had an important impact on bilateral support to number of UN agencies. Then you have also, domestic consideration. I always, and I keep saying colleagues, always look with some anxiety, some outcome of domestic election, because depending on the outcome, they will be more favorable or less favorable to some kind of activities. Among them is supporting UNRWA, the only agency providing assistance to Palestinian refugees. So across the UN system, there is indeed a deep anxiety about the impact of resources available and our ability collectively to cover all the multiple crises, but also to fund our commitment vis-à-vis the broader Sustainable Development Goal agenda. Now, UNRWA's difficulties have been pushed to the extreme, and that was also a message when I was in New York. I say, how do you want me to decide that because I have 20% less resource, that I have to ask 20% of the kids in our school who are enrolled for the next 10 years to drop out of the school because of the absence of this 20%. It's an impossible choice to be made when you are enrolled. Public services or institutions are not necessarily confronted to this situation, especially when it comes to education. So the impact of the underfunding in an organization like ours is far much different than in other contexts which would just prevent the realization of a given project or program or not covered assess need, but certainly not to undertake, I would say, where our main impact is human development. And all of a sudden you will say, well, continue human development, but not for 20% of the people we use to invest in. So there is a high risk to reverse all this. And in the ecosystem where we operate, if we drop 20% in one field, the rest of the field will also react and push back on this kind of situation. So that's the difficulties we are confronted with, basically. Any real possible to undertake in the absence of a political framework, political dialogue, political horizon, because otherwise it will be seen and perceived as an attempt to weaken the future right of the Palestinian refugees. Now, I do believe that the message in New York has been well understood. A number of member states have acknowledged the urgency of having this kind of a discussion. Most of the member states have highlighted that there is no real alternative in this situation to the organization, have highlighted how irreplaceable it is, and I hope that this will trigger, this last-minute mobilization of resource, but at the same time, the resource is not enough per se. We really have to agree on how do we make this organization predictable and sustainable. I believe that predictability for every actor in the region, it would be a plus to know what we can expect from the agency. And we are primarily a human development agency for the time being. Any prospect from the region? I think there is some room for improvement.
Okay. Any final questions? Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much, Commissioner General.
Thank you.
Now press briefing is finished, and thank you very much all guys. Please kindly like to my video and share my channel, also subscribe. We will meet soon for my next video. Thank you very much. All the best. Bye bye.